Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am thrilled to talk to Virginia Klausmeier. We're going to be, I think we're going to be diving into some really cool issues, things that I think that we're all impacted by in our world. And so I'm just excited to have you on here, Virginia. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
So tell everybody right now like, where you are in your leadership journey. What are you up to?
Um, wow. Okay. As much as that's a simple question, it's a loaded one. I founded a company in 2012. We got our first funding in 2014, really focusing on reducing carbon emissions for industrial manufacturing. So that's a mouthful. The goal was to really significantly reduce the carbon emissions in the planet, so empower clean energy, the clean energy future. So I generally have a really, really big, very hard to achieve goal ahead of me, which is how I started the company. And to topple that, I was just to kind of set the foundation. I was late in my 20s, early 30s. I definitely had some good success and career experience in larger organizations. My background just formally is chemistry, engineering, and business, just sort of at that intersection, started more in medical device, but really was inspired by my late father who ended up passing away. And I started a company with some initial foundings from him. So it was really triggered from a reality that I can't follow the normal trajectory because my life changed and how to take what I've been privileged to to have or get access to and really create a version of the world I want to see. So when you ask where I am on my career journey, I founded a company. I'm a founding CEO. I'm the chairman of the board. We are now in a position of really high growth. We're targeting a really large growing market. It's very exciting. Our team's about 25 folks. So I would say I'm at the in over my head stage, where I don't think I've had I look at my husband's career and he gets feedback and raises, and mine very much is not that pathway. I mean, I joke that no one ever tells me I do a good job and the results are very binary. Either it's success or failure. So there's not like very much between. But, on the good days and the days when I'm more grounded, I feel very fortunate to be in this high growth stage and to be in this position that I am to make a big impact and also to work with great people and be able to add in influence where it's useful.
What I love about what you're saying, well, there's a couple things. One is like the legacy of your father. That's awesome, like
Mm.
super amazing. It like, ooh, so touching. I just like it makes my hair stand up in the back of my neck. And then this idea of like being the change that you're seeking is it's
Mm.
almost like you're compelled to do it, and there's just no other option, which I think is just. I feel like we all should have one way, shape, or another that kind of drive to leave such a strong mark, and this the ability of being compelled all the things that we complain about. In this new book that I'm writing on the art of self-leadership, it was like the impetus for that was hearing from people in the audiences that I speak to, and I would ask them like, well, why, what is the barrier? Like, what is the reason why you can't be the person that I'm describing or the person that you want to be? And they would often say, things like, well, the leadership team, well, our resources, well, our executive, whatever. It was always like something else that was outside of them. And so my push with this book is kind of like, well, okay, let's get rid of the excuses, the blaming, the waiting, and let's what you're doing, which is let's be the change that we're seeking and stop like making excuses. Like let's just stop the
Yep.
insanity, right? And here are some ways that we can do that. And focusing first inwardly, and you have like you, it's obvious that you have like a very clear compass. Like it's just like, very clear for you. And I think that is just so amazing. I think we can all learn a lot from just
Blessing.
that story.
I mean, it is also like, I will tell you, like, it's years of heartbreak, obviously, to lose,
Mhm.
your dear parent, right? But the part that is really beautiful is just, and this is the circle of life, right? Is that it gave me the more that death was right in front of me because of
Mm.
just situations, it gave me that frame to say, okay, there's like, you can keep on moving forward in your
Mhm.
career and all these different experiences in life and be successful. But really, on my deathbed, what would I regret? And I know we talked a little bit about this in the
Mhm.
pre conversation, but and that's when it became very crystal clear. It was like, oh, could I have tried to change the world, but I was too scared and I didn't know how to do it. And that was all the reasons that stopped me.
Yeah.
That's a level of a big thing that I would think about on my deathbed that I would regret. So at least I need to do
Yep.
myself the service and just try. Right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and that was really a strong, just to your point, like it is really hard to get past and find that self urgency when everything's going pretty good, right? Because
Yes.
and especially as close as you are to a line of it being really bad, it's really
Mhm.
hard to then, the closer you are to that, like to actually do the thing that is risky or can create more change. So I know I feel very fortunate that the timing of that insight happened at a young age,
Mhm.
and now I'm trying to make sure I manifest and keep that in my older growth that I have in my leadership cycle. Yeah.
From the leadership side, I'm curious to know, was there something in particular that your father passed down to you on the leadership front? Like, there's something that you notice reveals itself in you and how you are with leading your family and how you are leading your company and things like that?
I love how you're focused on the positive, and that's great. So I think on the positive side, a big piece that was really strong was, really not judging people. I think, the way that he was as a person, he really loved unconditionally. And
Mm.
the sort of, I think as I get older, I realize that the strength you have does turn into the Achilles heel on some level, right? So the
Yes.
sort of downside of that is that if you
Yes.
actually give people a lot of like unconditional love and you love too many people, maybe you don't have enough room for those. But also, I think he just made poor choices in partners. So he actually had a lot of things he didn't do well on the business.
Hmm.
He was an innovator and ahead of his time on technology for sure. But when it came to business, his concept of the world didn't scale into that world. Um,
Mm.
so it's pretty interesting. So I think I actually, on my journey, I had a big visionary that I got to be close to that saw the world and the capability of the world in a very different light, which that was amazing to get that
Hmm.
access and to be having, love and all that be driving and be unconditional. But on the other side, practically, he probably wasn't that successful. And I didn't
Hmm.
have really great examples
Yep.
of I had lots of bad examples of what doesn't work. So, on my personal journey, it's been interesting to say and look at what does work. Who are people that do have these skill sets that thrive in all areas, and how does that scale?
I love that because I mean I think the key here, yeah, I'm focusing on positive, but in the end, like I still feel like there's so much to be learned from the leaders in our life, whether it's good, better, and different. And then this idea from you that like, what you took from them is like you took this one positive, and at the same time, you said, "I'm going to go searching for other people who can fill the gap of where maybe he wasn't as strong." Because, like I said before, like what I stand for, what I talk about this podcast is not at all about perfection. It is our leadership journey is bumpy, it's up and down, it's around and around, it's who knows what the heck it is, and it's up to us to figure it out. And we do need to include other people on that journey with us because we just don't know it all. So the fact that you were seeking, like, who else does this practical applicability part right to get me to the place now where, like you said, high growth, doing very well. And like you said, taking that huge visionary stuff that like there aren't many people in the world that are gonna, I am never going to do this. Try to look at, how am I going to solve for greenhouse gases? How am I going to solve the environmental leak? How am I going to do that? I wouldn't do that. Now I have a different, my vision is like, how do I make sure that people in this world feel heard, valued, and seen? How do I make
Mm,
sure that, you know what I mean? And that is my thing, which is kind of like, how you going to do that? But like we said, if we can control the thing we can control and we can show other people the thing they can control and it's within their little sphere, that I always call it like the circle we stand in, the seat we sit in, and we say, what can we control and influence in that? And if we had like 20,000 people all looking at that at one time, then their impact, like the impact on the things you're doing, are pretty massive, like little
mm,
things that we're all doing that impact your big, huge goal. Because like, it's not just you who's doing it. You're like having to get to the hearts of all these people, the pocketbooks of all these people, the minds of all these people, all the things to get them to want to move and to be influenced by the thing you're finding the most important in the world. Those are the leaders that move things. So I think you got that huge big thing and all that yummy stuff from your dad. And then you're getting these other things from these people that you're actively seeking out. And that's what we do. We do as strong self leaders. We do that as leaders of the heart. I mean, I think the stuff that you do in number one, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just so powerful. Somebody's got to do it. You're doing it. And I think that already says you're a leader with heart just because of that. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I almost say definitely because I am, I don't want to say like driven. I work very hard not to be driven by fear, but I mean, fear from short terms, but I am definitely fearful of kind of the long-term environment of the planet, right? So if my fear is my children waking up one day and being like, Mommy, I can't breathe. This is so bad. Why didn't you guys try harder to make the environment better? And and I was like, well, there was a guy that was mean to me. I didn't want to overcome that fear, So this is like
Exactly.
the thing I think about whenever on my daily basis when I get hung up or stuck. So I'm like, oh man, I need to figure out how to get around this because I can't just give up or lay it down. So it's too big of a piece to keep on moving forward.
It is. And I also think, like, for those who are listening, I think the message here too is like we can get so debilitated by maybe like our own big vision or our own big goals or organizational goals or whatever that might be, family goals, community goals, and get so overwhelmed and debilitated that we like just do nothing. And then we lay back with those regrets. This whole regret concept has been, we talked about this before. It just like hit me like a lot by ton of bricks this last couple of weeks. And I just have been like, okay, now every decision I'm going to be making is going to be, and I know it can't be about fear, but it kind of is. They either say you either change because of a fear or some kind of like positive thing, a carrot or a stick, right? And I do believe that in this case, if we are everything that we do every day, like these things that we call habits that we do every day, we do them for a reason. It could be a greater good for us, a greater good for our community or our families, and they just start to get bigger, bigger, like macro, micro kind of thing. And so then if I don't do this thing based upon my vision for whatever your vision is, which is worse, doing the thing or not doing the thing? It's the gist there.
I've been
And
trying. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like if you continue, if you say like, which will I regret? Because it does give you a longer term view. It kind of gets you out of this stuckness. Like
It's just a
I'm
trigger to
stuck.
give you a different, bigger, broader thinking.
Yeah. And I
And
love
those
that.
triggers are very useful, like what works. Like I'm curious if that scales to how many people. For me, it was really effective.
Yes,
Sounds like
absolutely.
for you, it's pretty effective, but
It is.
imagine there's some people, like I do have a friend and she's like, I never think about my future. And I was like, what? Like
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
I
yeah.
just don't understand. How can that be true? And she's like, I just know everything's gonna like, it'll work out. I'll figure out the things I need to figure out at those times. I'm like, that's crazy. Like
Yeah,
I
that is
never even
crazy.
thought about not thinking about the future like
I
that.
have two kids who would say that a lot, and then I figured out with one. See, that's look at this happens just like I didn't do that purposely. For those who aren't seeing it and they're hearing this, I just raised my hand and balloons popped out all over the screen. That's what happens when you're on a Mac. So anyway, the two kids who will say it out of my four, they the first one would say it. So he's the eldest boy, and he would say it because it would if he didn't have to think about the future, then he would minimize his stress and anxiety. And so if he would think too far ahead, related, for example, to his personal future, not necessarily the world, but like his personal future, it would make him like and get really like and you can't control things. And so it's like he would just really focus on today and the thing he thought he had the most influence control over, which there is a certain level of like good mental, emotional well-being strategy in that too. But then I think as he's gotten older now, he kind of has no choice but to think of like where am I going to be in 5 years? And I noticed that he's able to kind of manage the stress more. And I don't know if it's because he was able to kind of self
Mm.
that control that earlier on by keeping it smaller. I don't know. And so then the youngest one, who those two are really close now, he's gotten to say, well, I think about this is like that same thing. And I noticed it's a stress reduction, kind of like a survival response by those two. Isn't that
Mm.
funny? And the other two totally think about the future all the time, and they do tend to be the more anxious kids.
Interesting.
So just something just a little side note for those who are
Yeah.
listening, for you and I, right, as we're sitting talking about this. I one of the things I always what do you when you think of the term or the phrase leadership at heart, what do you think of immediately?
Leadership at heart. I think of
No, no, leadership with heart.
with heart. Sorry.
That's right.
I mean, I really, there's two things that immediately come to mind. One is leading by example, and then the other is being empathetic.
Yes.
And a tactic or something I strive for that I feel like is very good to support both of those outcomes is being present.
Mhm. Yeah.
conversation and trying to do all those things, active listening and
Mhm.
engagement, prepared. So but yeah, I also one thing that comes to my mind too is a level of it's not just softness, but it's
Mhm.
like lightness that comes so that it just feels like, you know, more of like you're being a fairy fluttering through during your day versus like preparing, like do all these things that are really blocked. I don't know. And it feels like there's a high level of congruency. So
Mm.
every situation that you're in, when you're in that flow state of leading with the heart, you're in a level of congruency and energy level doesn't kind of like dip low and go high. It stays in like a very good high level of operation baseline.
I love that. And I love it from your view of like the chemistry, like science person. I love that so much. Even though, I mean, I had that a little bit in my background. I tend to be more of a liberal arts person, but science was still like a strength of mine early on. And to this day, I love working with people who are scientists. Well, I have a son now who's in engineering school and he's just like, oh my gosh, he's such an engineer. But I know that I have to speak a certain way or speak in his language for us to really be able to connect or give him certain ways because he likes to take time to really process and think. And he can't move quickly. It drives him nuts when we have to look for a quick decision. And I noticed that type of thing. Obviously, I've worked with engineers, I've worked with scientists before because of the different diverse type of clients I work with. And I just love that really like the baseline concept. And I talk about congruency a lot. I think congruency is so important in leadership. And when we aren't, we have to call our own selves on the carpet for it. So when we see the gaps in of what we say we value and what we actually represent, I think it's really critical. So I am curious to know for you, is there ever a time you can think of, based upon your definition, where you did not show up as a leader with heart and you're like, ugh, I really sucked when I did that. What did that look like? And then what
Yeah.
did you do to come out of it?
I mean, so I think that like there's definitely a spectrum, but the general feeling of I know things aren't probably gonna go the way I wanted to be is when the more I'm going in with a general agenda and I have a specific outcome I'm looking for and I'm anxious about the conversation, right? Like I don't believe that the party I'm going to be going to. And this is, this happens. It's been my biggest area of growth has been working internally. Um, and trying to work through the right level of alignment with senior members of my team and get into their working styles and my working style, be able to share my needs or my concerns in a way that's tangible and is acknowledged. And that's been, because each one of them, in the center of executives, they have like we're all working towards the same goal. So it's not the same as like my board of directors or different investors or different customers, right? It's a little bit
Yes.
easier to know what they like, where they're coming from and what they need. But from my senior executive level, it's been hard because one, I care about them. I care about the rapport. Two, we have no time, right? We never have enough time to build rapport. And, we are just trying to get more efficient and on the tactics. And usually the meetings I have not, come well is when I come with trying to drive an agenda and I believe I know how they're going to respond, which is a not negative, is in a negative way in my mind. And so it just creates this really messy, bad experience, probably for everyone, right? And like for sure from everyone, because I'm so bottled with anxiety going into it because that I just am not able to listen. I'm not able to
Thank
be
you.
present. I don't ask questions. I'm not curious. I just do all the things that are wrong to make someone feel heard, valued. Like
So true. Yeah, it is interesting how when we go into meetings with our own agenda, we're just basically seeking to respond or like seeking to be right. The other people never feel heard on the other end, do they? And that's not a very fun place to be, I think. And interestingly enough, like I don't know about you, because again, we all do this to people. This is, by the way, we all do this to people. If anybody's listening right now saying, "Oh, I don't do that," that we were all lying to ourselves. We all do this to people, some more than others, right? But if you can think of a time when maybe you felt like the most small and insignificant in the workplace, before you were doing your own thing, I'd venture to guess it was somebody who, because there was somebody on the other end who did not see you. They did not take the time to hear you. You just felt like completely stopped in your tracks from any like thinking you had, right? And
I
then
mean,
if is that true? Like, would that be the truth? If there's ever a time when you
yeah,
felt
yeah. I
like
mean, I
super
think it's
small?
happened in the earlier stages of my career. I remember acutely when it would happen, and then how I'd feel afterwards, depending on how, like, what I would say, like if I stood up for myself or not, or if
Hmm.
just like the different levels of frustration or like residual feelings that happen, and that's what's great about experience, right? So like it does give you more data points
That's
on
true.
how you can feel in these different, and sometimes you just don't care. And that's important to know. If you don't care, then should you really be spending your time doing that? Like, and these are things like all that's like useful,
Yes.
right? Like it's just,
So true.
yeah, it's very useful information. But yeah, completely. I mean, I remember definitely feeling very small and unseen in a lot of time scenarios. And I think about that given my current position with like everyone, different members of the company, and just trying to be different, right? Not create a
Yeah.
culture where that is the case.
And that's all we can do, right? Is try to be different than the worst case scenarios. And I mean, really, it's true. It's like because we get to try to be different, but I mean, in the end, we're all gonna mess up,
Yeah.
right? And I think the grace of knowing that, and at the same time, so it's like this counterbalance of like the grace of knowing I'm gonna mess up, and other people do too. None of us are perfect, and at the same time, this like forward thinking thing that says, and I have a responsibility just like you have that responsibility in your mind of like what we do with the planet. It's like, and I have this responsibility that when people are coming along with me on this journey, or there's somehow I encounter them on this journey as I'm doing this really big thing that's like mind-boggling for the average human, then to understand that like even in our small interactions with each other, we do mind-boggling things because we don't really realize that those like small interactions that are happening along the way of our bigger macro journey, when we are doing those things, we change how people see themselves. We change how they treat other people based upon how we interacted and treated them. And then like that ripple effect of how other people now treat each other, and it's massive. And I think most don't think of it that way.
I mean, one act of kindness can go so far, right?
Hmm.
And when you're in a leadership position within an organization, that is pretty significant too,
Hmm.
but just on, in any circumstance. So just knowing that impact, to your point, it is so, it's a magnitude more important to be able to have that bandwidth and that capability
Hmm.
with the heart and be able to match and meet people.
And it's hard to do because, especially what you were saying, like we have no time, and it's like that's like almost every leader could claim that, right? We have no time. It's so true. Like where's the time? And I think I always say like there's two things. One is like you got to make the time because actually you get way more accomplished. More balloons, ladies and gentlemen, more balloons. But you get much more accomplished when you are able to do it with other people. So like your goal, that's like this again, this massive mind-boggling thing. It only gets done through other people. And so
Mhm.
it is completely incumbent upon you to make sure you have that time and you insert the presence and all those things to show the elements of care because that's how you get more done. So it's like you get both sides. You get the good stuff and you get the stuff to get stuff done. There's a level of productivity that increases when we do that, right? And then I think the other thing is when we are people who are always so busy, which we all are, we have to be super intentional to load into ourselves, like to fill our own cups up too. Like we have to, right? Because otherwise, if we just feel like, "Ugh," which happens again, I mean, I think not just women, although I think women in particular, because we have families and we tend to take on more, and it's just the way it is, that we have to be so super intentional to say, I'm going to take a pause right here and go like do X, Y, Z, whatever the heck it is that fills you up. Because if we don't, then we do end up like so over, like under the water, like up to our necks and just everybody else's stuff that we can't lead other people with a heart that actually makes us quite unique. So if we aren't able to like to show our hearts and we can't, it doesn't spill over, we kind of let go of our power because that is literally our unique power, right? So I think it's interesting how all this plays out, and believe me, we all struggle with it. I can, I feel on my shoulders. Oh, I feel on my shoulders. It's just so much, right? And so the self-care, loading into ourselves, I think is critical in this too. So for those who are listening right now, who may be kind of, wow, taking on some big vision at a crossroads, at a turning point, an interesting place in their journey, what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you might leave them with? Maybe just some coping things, some strategies, or something that can help them on their journey too.
Mm. I mean, I have never regretted jumping ship and trying to start the company and taking this massive leap of faith. Like, never looked back. If I could say anything, I should have done it sooner. I hesitated for probably 8 months to a year longer than I needed to. And that showed up in a lot of different ways. But, so I would say there's really, and most people I talk to as well, never regrets in trying, trying that hard thing, right? That you're going after. Like, you're always going to be curious and you're going to learn from it. And you're going to learn so much from it if kind of your survival depends on it. It just is different, right? Like, you're going to understand what is your max capacities, what are your assets that you're uniquely qualified to do, manage, support, all these different attributes that will help you in many different ways of your life. And also your deficiencies, right? So what gaps do you have? What do you need by your side to fill those gaps? What are skill sets that are really complementary and important? So I would say, yeah, never, the jump of faith and the risk is definitely, it's well worth the learnings, even if you don't get the immediate economic contribution. My other piece is congruency. I mean, for me personally, I'm in a space where there's not very many men, and in the entrepreneur world, there's very few women that are in long-term relationships and or have children. So, I mean, it's just like being the high growth, space where venture-backed organizations, like there's less than 1.8% of venture-backed money goes to women. So it's just, there's not that many good examples. And I really wanted to, and I felt like it was going to be really valuable for me to have a family and as like a personal journey, have a life partner and also do something that is very impactful and I care a lot about. So trying to be congruent on who I am in all those different worlds, even though there's not that many examples, you can pave the way. And I do believe that it's all additive. So it is the more congruent of a human I am and I am grounded and centered, the more that I am able to be a breakthrough leader and be a good parent and be a good partner, all the other elements. So and you mentioned that, but congruency for me has been one that I've constantly struggled with because I felt like they were in competition with each other because they're a lot of times they're in competition to, with your one notable asset, time, right? I'm gonna spend time on this, I'm not gonna spend time on that. Like I have to do this, I have to do that. And it's very easy to just look at things as like taking away from your ability to have time for this other thing, So this is my current struggle is trying to make sure that that's not a useful frame for me. It doesn't energetically serve me at all. Right. So,
Exactly.
but if I am making the time to be with my children, then be with my children and have that time and have them feel connected and feed that soul. If I'm doing that with my company, be 100% in, give 100% myself, best self, and if I'm not, then check in, do the things I need to your point, meditate, go for a walk, correct, to then show up in a way that's needed. Right. But the more that I am in those that flow state in those different circumstances, the more that all magic happens, the world and it happens. And it's pretty cool.
Thank you so much for being on here. Really, Virginia, just number one, just being who you are. I mean, somebody's got to be out there doing that work to do something for our planet. So I thank you for being one of the humans doing that, because I know there's so many people dedicated. I'm glad you're one of them, and I appreciate you coming on the show. For those who are listening to, if you found this to be valuable, I know you did, just share this far and wide. Make sure that more and more people get access to just knowing about different leaders like Virginia out in the world, and just hearing some of the things that we've been talking about today. But I do appreciate you being on here, taking the time out of your, I already know, really, really busy day to be with me.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to take a step back. Yeah. And chat.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.